Hey, it's Tom Michael, General Manager here at Boise State Public Radio. Right now, public media is under threat. The White House has asked Congress to take back funding already approved for the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, funding that sustains Boise State Public Radio and NPR stations like ours across the country. We stand to lose over $500,000 annually, jeopardizing our newsroom, programming, and mission. You can help. Learn how to take action at boisestatepublicradio.org/funding.
More Idaho Matters now from the studios of Boise State Public Radio News. I'm Gemma Cadet. Before big box retailers like Walmart and Winco became the go-to stop for groceries, mom and pop stores dotted the Boise area. Now, these historic markets were supported by local farmers and craftspeople, and they really served as community centers. Barbara Perry Bauer owns TAG Historical Research and Consulting, and she's been documenting the skeletons of Boise's grocery shops for more than a decade now. And she's joining us to talk more about the North End's historic markets. Barbara, it's really nice to have you on the show.
Thank you, Gemma. It's good to be here.
So can you talk to us a little bit more about the background of these historic markets?
Well, it was very common throughout the United States, beginning way back, that people would have these little stores that were near where people lived, near residential areas. And in Boise, those corner markets really lined Main Street before the neighborhood started to grow further away from downtown. Once the streetcar came around and people could live further down Warm Springs in the East End and then all the way up into the Hyde Park area and the North End, these little stores would pop up, and some of them might be maybe a block from the streetcar or maybe a block from your home. But the North End and the East End were served very conveniently by a number of stores.
So what did the Boise area look like when these shops were still around? Because as you mentioned, the North End and the East End of Boise served well. I mean, I'm thinking even today about the M&W Market on Warm Springs.
Yes, that is still a neighborhood grocery store. And a lot of these stores were not specifically in a building that was constructed to look like a grocery store. Many of these neighborhood markets were actually in homes, and it might just be the front room of a house that was used for the grocery store. Or perhaps it would be like the Greenhouse Grocery, which was over on Pueblo Street, where you had the store on the bottom floor, and then you had people who lived upstairs who owned and ran the store. And sometimes, as you walk through the North End, look down, because there are little markers that advertise or name these buildings that used to be grocery stores. And it's kind of a surprise, because sometimes a building will not be recognizable as a grocery store.
How did you first become interested in investigating these historic neighborhood grocery stores?
Well, I had the idea probably about 2011 or 2012. And I was talking with Mark Baltus, who at the time was the president of the North End Neighborhood Association. And he thought it would be a really great idea if there was some survey work and research work done to see how many markets were just within the boundaries of the North End. And we started to do our research, and of course, he got more interested, and the sesquicentennial was coming along, and it seemed like a really great project in the scheme of Boise's history to identify neighborhood markets. And so that's sort of how it began. And our research indicated that between about 1900 and 1980, in the North End, there were well over 50 neighborhood grocery stores. And as time went on, I, of course, got interested in looking at other places in Boise, not just the North End. And so I've been fortunate to be able to document stores throughout the city. But here are some statistics I thought were pretty interesting. Using the city directories, in 1900, we identified 25 grocery stores, neighborhood stores. In 1950, 111. And then by 1980, there were only 7 left.
Oh, my gosh. So you mentioned that some of these stores were in homes. So would that also kind of mean that they may have been like social spaces for the neighborhood, like gathering spaces? What was the atmosphere like for this?
Well, I've talked to a number of people who actually remembered going to the grocery stores, when they were younger. And many of the stores did act as a communication centers, and it would be where people would gather and talk about what was going on in the neighborhood. Some of the grocery stores actually had they were post office, and so you could pick up your mail there. For people who didn't have telephones, sometimes the grocery stores to would allow you to, you know, weigh a child there or do something like that.
Hmm.
So they were definitely neighborhood centers.
And were these spaces, how important were they to the community as a whole?
Well, I think they were very important. For instance, one of the people I spoke to whose father ran the Elkhorn Market, which was over in the North End, what she recalled is that her father did deliveries. And sometimes, if he either didn't make a delivery to a house for a number of days, or if he didn't get a call in order from a customer, then he would personally go and check to see how they were doing. So it was really a sort of almost a safety network in some ways. And that alone, of course, keeping an eye on your neighbors is pretty important. And so that was one of the ways that they served the community. And they also were, where people could share news, where people could advertise what was going on. I think that today, basically, coffee shops have sort of taken the
Hmm.
role of what the markets used to be.
What was it like to be a shopkeeper in one of those locations?
Well, from what I have learned from talking to different people, it was definitely hard work. Most of the stores were open 6 days a week, which would be Monday through Saturday. They typically opened at 8 and would close at 6 o'clock. In some of the stores, often, people would have two jobs. So perhaps one spouse would be working a job and the other spouse would manage the store. A lot of times, of course, you would have kids. If you had your children there, a lot of times those children would also work in the store. So it was a family affair for some of the groceries.
And it sounds like, in particular in the North End, that did they actually have the ability to place their grocery orders by phone and then get home delivery? I mean, this seems quite modern for the time that we're talking about.
It was very common, and not every grocery store did it, but many of them did offer that service. And in a way, we came full cycle when COVID occurred and the bigger grocery stores
Mm.
started to offer that same kind of a service again.
So, why do you believe it's important that not only that we remember these old shops that were scattered around Boise, but really to learn about them? Because I mean, I'm sitting here talking to you, being like, this I never knew about a lot of these shops. I mean, in particular, these ones you talked about that were inside people's homes.
Well, I think it's important because, again, it just shows the changes over time. And those small stores were a way for people to support themselves, especially women. It was a way that women who may have been single or widowed, they had the opportunity to continue to support themselves if they owned a grocery store. Um,
Hmm.
Also, again, the fact that these were community centers, I think, again, that's really important because as times have changed, it feels like in many ways that we don't have that closeness to our neighbors and to our community. And I think that looking back at the grocery stores and seeing what they offered the neighborhoods is important.
Eh, Do you have a favorite old mom and pop shop out of the ones that you've researched so far?
I think it's really hard because there are a couple, but definitely one of my favorites was, or what was, the Greenhouse grocery store over on Pueblo and 10th. And I think
Hmm.
it's because when you look at it, it was an architectural style that you would immediately recognize as a grocery store. And it was in that neighborhood from the early 1900s all the way through the 1970s before it no longer operated as a store. And I think the longevity and just knowing that that little grocery store was there for so long is pretty interesting.
What's in its place now? Like if you were to go over to 10th and Pueblo?
The building is still there, and it has recently been restored by the current owners who purchased the building, I think, around 2017. Um, on the exterior, it looks pretty much the same, and they retained some of the architectural elements and used them to decorate the interior of their home. So it is definitely a very distinctive style of building. And once
Hmm.
you take a look at that and you walk around Boise streets, you'll probably see a few more that are in the same type of a architectural style and be able to say, oh yeah, well, that's one of those stores.
Well, I was just going to ask you that if any of these grocery stores still exist in the Boise area. I mean, not necessarily as grocery stores, but the buildings themselves.
There are a number of those buildings that still exist. And I think, of course, the two that come to mind for many people was the building that is now the Hollywood Yoga Studio, but it was the Hollywood
Hmm.
Market. And of course, the Roosevelt Market over in the East End. And all of Hyde Park, when you think about the commercial center of Hyde Park, those two were neighborhood grocery stores. It was the commercial heart of Hyde Park, but a few of the people who started their grocery stores along that block actually moved into other parts of the city and opened other little grocery stores in their neighborhoods where they moved.
So I only have about a minute left with you, Barbara. If people want to learn more or explore these old sites, where can they find more information?
Well, we did a publication a few years ago, a little pamphlet that we offer for free through our company. And so they can just email, me or contact Tag, and we can provide that to them. There are also some newspaper articles that were done. So if anybody likes to read the newspaper in the Statesman, you can go back and learn a little bit more. But as far as the local grocery stores, the other great thing is if they want to learn more, again, this will be in the North End, there are 4 interpretive signs that are located at several parks in the North End that explain the history of the stores in that neighborhood.
Well, I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your day to talk with us about this. Such an interesting conversation. We've been speaking with historian Barbara Perry Bauer, remembering the mom and pop shops of Boise's past. And that'll do it for this episode of Idaho Matters. Thanks so much for listening. And just a reminder, you can find all of our episodes wherever you get your podcasts.
Planet Money helps you understand the economy. We find the people at the center of the story.
Garbage in New York, that was like a controlled substance.
We show you how money influences everything.
Tell me what you like by telling me how you spend your money.
And we dig until we get answers.
I had a bad feeling you were going to bring that up.
Planet Money finds out. All you have to do is listen. The Planet Money Podcast from NPR.